Of all the things I expected that day, this was not one of them. It started like any other afternoon. A quiet house, a long to-do list, and the scent of fresh lemon cleaner filling the air. I was scrubbing down the kitchen counters, lost in thought, when I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I turned to see my stepson standing there, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. At first, I thought he needed something, maybe a snack or help finding something in the house. But what came out of his mouth next sent a chill down my spine. He hesitated for a moment, shifting awkwardly on his feet. "I need to tell you something," he finally said. His voice was lower than usual, almost trembling. I set down the rag in my hand, wiping my fingers on my apron. "What is it?" I asked, not realizing that his next words would turn my world upside down. "I have feelings for you." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. My body froze, my mind racing to make sense of what he had just said. "What?" I let out almost in a whisper, hoping, praying that he meant something different, that maybe, just maybe, I was misunderstanding. But the way he looked at me, the intensity in his eyes, made it clear. He meant every word. A deep, uncomfortable silence filled the space between us. My heart pounded as a wave of emotions crashed over me: shock, confusion, even a strange sense of disbelief. This was my stepson, the boy I had helped raise, the boy I had cared for like my own. And now, here he was, standing in my kitchen, confessing something that should have never even crossed his mind. I took a slow step back, needing space, needing to breathe. "You don't mean that," I said, shaking my head as if denying it would somehow erase what had just happened. "You're confused. This, this isn't right." But he didn't back down. If anything, he looked more determined. "I've felt this way for a long time," he admitted. "I just couldn't keep it in anymore." My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the counter. I wanted to scream, to run, to pretend this wasn't happening. How had things come to this? How had I missed the signs, if there even were any? And more than anything, how was I going to fix this before it shattered everything? At that moment, the front door creaked open. My husband was home. I could hear him setting down his keys, his usual routine after a long day. But I wasn't ready for him to walk in. I wasn't ready for him to see the panic on my face or the tension in the air. And I definitely wasn't ready to explain what had just happened. I glanced at my stepson, his expression unreadable now. He knew as well as I did that nothing would ever be the same after this. And as my husband's footsteps grew closer, my stomach twisted into knots, because no matter what happened next, there was no escaping the truth. My heart pounded so hard, I was sure my husband would hear it the moment he stepped inside. My stepson and I locked eyes for a second, both of us frozen, the weight of what had just happened hanging between us like thick, suffocating air. I could hear the sound of my husband's shoes against the hardwood floor, getting closer. My stomach twisted. Did I say something? Act normal? Pretend everything was fine? But how could I, when my entire world had just shifted in a way I never saw coming? I forced myself to take a deep breath, gripping the counter to steady my shaking hands. My stepson's expression had changed. He wasn't nervous anymore. If anything, he looked calm, as if he had expected this, as if he had made peace with whatever would happen next. But I hadn't. My mind was still reeling, searching for a way to undo the last few minutes, to go back to before he had spoken those words, before everything became so incredibly complicated. The kitchen door swung open, and there was my husband, smiling as he loosened his tie. "Hey, what's for dinner?" he asked casually, completely unaware of the storm brewing right in front of him. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "I was just finishing up cleaning." I said, my voice barely steady. I glanced at my stepson, hoping, praying he would follow my lead and not say anything. He did. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, watching. My husband leaned in, pressing a kiss to my cheek, and I flinched, just barely, but enough. Enough for my stepson to notice, enough for me to feel my heart drop. Had I ever reacted like that before? Had he ever noticed the way my body tensed when things felt off? Did I look different? Sound different? Was I giving myself away without even realizing it? I turned back to the sink, my hands moving on their own, scrubbing a plate that was already clean. I needed something to do, something to focus on, but I could feel my stepson's eyes on me, watching, waiting. And the worst part? I didn't know what he was waiting for. That night, everything felt different. At dinner, my stepson barely spoke, but he didn't avoid eye contact either. It was as if he wanted me to remember, to sit there across from him and know that we shared a secret, a terrible, unsettling secret that could tear this family apart. And as my husband laughed at something on TV later that evening, completely unaware, I realized something that made my stomach twist even more. This wasn't over, not even close. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my husband's steady breathing beside me, the only sound in the room. My mind kept replaying the moment in the kitchen, the words I never expected to hear, the look in my stepson's eyes. How had this happened? Had I done something, anything, to make him feel this way? I kept going over every interaction, every small moment, wondering if I had missed the signs. But no matter how hard I searched for answers, nothing made sense. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost, trying to act normal. My husband left early for work, kissing me goodbye like always, completely unaware of the growing tension between his son and me. And then, just like I feared, my stepson and I were alone again. He was already sitting at the kitchen table when I turned around, sipping his coffee like nothing had changed. But everything had. "You haven't said anything," he finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was something else behind it, something unreadable. I set down the dish I was holding and turned to face him. "Because I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You can't just—" I stopped myself, lowering my voice. "This isn't right. You know that." His expression didn't change. "I don't care," he said simply, "and you don't have to pretend like this didn't mean something." A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't backing down. He wasn't embarrassed or ashamed. He meant every word, and that scared me more than anything. Because if he wasn't gonna let this go, then what was gonna happen next? I felt my throat tighten as I stood there, my mind racing for the right words, anything that would make this stop before it spiraled even further. But no matter what I said, I knew he wouldn't just forget. The way he looked at me, so sure of himself, so convinced that this was something real, sent a deep unease through me. "I need you to understand," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. "This can't happen. It's not right. You're confused and—" "I'm not confused," he interrupted, his eyes locked onto mine. "I know exactly how I feel." I took a step back, needing space, needing air. But he followed, not aggressively, just enough to make me feel cornered. The walls of the kitchen felt like they were closing in, and I had never wanted to escape a room so badly in my life. "I don't know what you expect me to do," I whispered, gripping the edge of the counter. "I love your father. This isn't—" "You don't have to say it." He cut me off again, his voice softer this time, almost pleading. "I just— I needed you to know." A part of me wanted to believe this was just a phase, something he would wake up from and regret. But the way he looked at me, like he had been carrying this secret for too long, made it clear he wasn't letting go of this easily, and that terrified me. Then the front door opened. My husband was home early. My heart jumped to my throat, and my stepson's expression didn't change. He simply took a slow step back, giving me space, but the damage was already done. As my husband walked in, greeting us both with a warm smile, I forced myself to return it, pretending like nothing was wrong. But inside, panic clawed at me, because I knew this wasn't over. In fact, I had a terrible feeling it was only just beginning. I felt my throat tighten as I stood there, my mind racing for the right words, anything that would make this stop before it spiraled even further. But no matter what I said, I knew he wouldn't just forget. The way he looked at me, so sure of himself, so convinced that this was something real, sent a deep unease through me. "I need you to understand," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. "This can't happen. It's not right. You're confused and—" "I'm not confused," he interrupted, his eyes locked onto mine. "I know exactly how I feel." I took a step back, needing space, needing air. But he followed, not aggressively, just enough to make me feel cornered. The walls of the kitchen felt like they were closing in, and I had never wanted to escape a room so badly in my life. "I don't know what you expect me to do," I whispered, gripping the edge of the counter. "I love your father. This isn't—" "You don't have to say it," he cut me off again, his voice softer this time, almost pleading. I needed you to know." A part of me wanted to believe this was just a phase, something he would wake up from and regret. But the way he looked at me, like he had been carrying this secret for too long, made it clear he wasn't letting go of this easily. And that terrified me. Then the front door opened. My husband was home early. My heart jumped to my throat, and my stepson's expression didn't change. He simply took a slow step back, giving me space, but the damage was already done. As my husband walked in, greeting us both with a warm smile, I forced myself to return it, pretending like nothing was wrong. But inside, panic clawed at me, because I knew this wasn't over. In fact, I had a terrible feeling it was only just beginning. I forced myself to smile as my husband walked in, acting as if everything was normal. But my heart was still racing, my mind stuck on the conversation that had just happened. My stepson said nothing. He didn't need to. The tension was thick, but only I seemed to feel it. My husband kissed my cheek, oblivious, then turned to his son. "You're home early," he said casually, setting his briefcase down. "Everything okay?" My stepson didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he answered smoothly. "Just wanted to spend some time with family." The way he said it made my stomach twist. It wasn't the words themselves, but the way he looked at me while saying them, like he knew something I didn't, like he was playing a game I wasn't prepared for. I turned away quickly, busying myself with dinner, trying to steady my hands. But then my husband said something that made my blood run cold. "I actually ran into Lisa today," he said, pouring himself a drink. "She mentioned something strange." Lisa was a family friend, one of those people who seemed to know everything about everyone. I forced a neutral expression. "Oh?" "She said she saw you two together the other day, sitting in a car, talking." He turned to his son with an easy laugh. "She thought it looked intense." I froze. My stepson, on the other hand, didn't. He just smiled. "Yeah," he said casually, taking a sip of his drink. "We were just talking. Nothing serious." But that wasn't true. I knew exactly what day Lisa had seen us. It was the day before his confession, the day he had asked me to meet him alone. I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten. My husband chuckled, shaking his head. "Lisa always reads into things too much." But I wasn't so sure. because now someone else had noticed, someone else had seen something. And the worst part? My stepson didn't seem to care. If anything, he looked amused, like he was enjoying how easily the truth could be hidden. And that terrified me even more. For the next few days, I lived in constant fear, waiting for the moment everything would fall apart. My stepson didn't mention his confession again, but he didn't have to. The way he watched me, the way he acted so calm, as if he held all the power, made it clear. He was waiting for something. Then, one evening, everything came crashing down. My husband had just stepped out to take a call, leaving us alone in the living room. I kept my distance, pretending to be focused on my phone, but I could feel my stepson's eyes on me. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I think we should tell him." My breath caught. "Tell him what?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "The truth," he said, leaning in slightly. "That I have feelings for you, that you're avoiding me because you feel something too." My head snapped up. "That's not true," I hissed, my pulse racing. "I never—" "Then why do you look so scared?" He cut in, tilting his head. "You think he'll believe you over me?" Panic surged through me. He wasn't just holding on to his feelings. He was twisting them into something dangerous. Before I could respond, the front door opened. My husband walked in, smiling, completely unaware of the storm brewing in front of him. And then my stepson spoke. "Dad, there's something you should know." I froze, but before he could continue, my husband's phone rang again. He sighed, checking the screen. "Hold that thought," he said, stepping outside once more. My stepson smirked, leaning in closer. "Looks like you have a little more time," he whispered. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't planning to tell the truth. He was planning to destroy me. I felt like the walls were closing in. My stepson's smirk, his confidence, it was all too much. He wasn't just trying to confess anymore. He wanted control. He wanted to twist the truth into something dangerous, and he knew I was powerless to stop him. But then something unexpected happened. My husband's phone call lasted longer than expected, and my stepson's patience started to wear thin. I saw it in the way his smirk faded, the way his fingers tapped against the table. He was waiting for the perfect moment, but the longer he waited, the less control he had. I took a shaky breath and made a decision. I wasn't going to let him trap me in this twisted game. Keeping my voice steady, I met his gaze. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, making sure every word was clear. "And if you try to ruin this family with lies, you'll only end up hurting yourself." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to push back. He wanted me scared, but I refused to let him win. And just like that, the power he thought he had started to slip away. The front door opened again, and my husband walked in, sighing. "Sorry about that. What were you saying?" He looked between us, completely unaware of the tension hanging in the air. For a moment, my stepson didn't say anything. Then, to my surprise, he shook his head and forced a small smile. "Nothing," he muttered. "It wasn't important." I exhaled slowly, watching as he stood up and left the room. The threat wasn't completely gone, but in that moment, I knew I had taken back control. And that was enough.